AKAN tradition, Ghana and Ivory Coast. Beliefs, rituals, and traditions. The Sankofa bird looks backward while moving forward. It is not wrong to go back and fetch what you forgot. The crow, the divine spark given by God at birth. The Sunsum, the personal spirit that makes you who you are. The Adinkra symbols, a visual philosophical language in which every form is a teaching and every teaching is alive. Allegricity 11.q Productions. Contents. Introduction, the AKAN and the philosophical richness of Ghana. Part 1, who the AKAN are, history, geography, and culture. Part 2, AKAN cosmology, Niam, the universe, and the sacred order. Part 3, the soul anatomy, Kro, Sunsum, Mogia, and Toro. Part 4, the Kro in detail, the divine spark at birth. Part 5, the Sunsum, the personal spirit and character. Part 6, destiny, free will, and the AKAN understanding of fate. Part 7, Niam and the AKAN understanding of God. Part 8, the Abuzum, AKAN spiritual forces. Part 9, the ancestors in AKAN life. Part 10, the Adinkra symbols, a visual philosophical language. Part 11, the 28 major Adinkra symbols. Part 12, how to work with Adinkra symbols. Part 13, Kent cloth, sacred weaving as philosophy. Part 14, the stools, sacred authority and ancestral power. Part 15, the golden stool of Asante. Part 16, AKAN sacred ritual, libation and the ancestors. Part 17, how to pour libation, step by step. Part 18, the festival calendar and the sacred year. Part 19, puberty and coming of age, Bragoro. Part 20, death and funerary practice in AKAN tradition. Part 21, AKAN healing, herbalism and sacred medicine. Part 22, the Okyomi, the art of sacred speech. Part 23, AKAN proverbs as sacred wisdom. Part 24, AKAN tradition today. Part 25, Allegricity convergences. Introduction. Among the many rich philosophical and spiritual traditions of West Africa, the AKAN tradition of present-day Ghana and Ivory Coast holds a distinctive position. It is simultaneously one of the most complete in terms of its philosophical sophistication, one of the most visually expressive in terms of its sacred art forms, and one of the most directly accessible to practitioners outside the tradition through the worldwide recognition of the Adinkra symbols and the Sankofa concept. The AKAN are not a single ethnic group but a family of related peoples, the Asante, the Fanti, the Akopom, the Akyom, the Denkaira, the Bono, and others, who share a common language family, a common cosmological framework, and a common set of cultural institutions including the matrilineal clan system, the stool as sacred authority, and the Adinkra symbol tradition. The Asante Kingdom at its height in the 18th and 19th centuries was one of the most powerful and most sophisticated states in West Africa. For Allegricity, the AKAN tradition offers three specific and irreplaceable gifts: a soul anatomy that is among the most complete and most philosophically precise in any tradition, the Adinkra symbol system as a living visual philosophy in which every form is a teaching, and the Sankofa principle, perhaps the most holy concept in any tradition anywhere, the teaching that looking backward to reclaim what was lost is not regression but wisdom. Who the AKAN are: history, geography, and culture. The AKAN peoples inhabit the southern and central portions of present-day Ghana and the eastern portions of Ivory Coast, a region of tropical forest, coastal savanna, and rich agricultural land that has been one of the most productive and most politically sophisticated areas of West Africa for over a millennium. The AKAN peoples trace their origins to the ancient Ghana Empire and to the forest peoples who have inhabited the region since prehistoric times. The Asante Kingdom. The most historically prominent AKAN state was the Asante Kingdom, founded in the late 17th century by Osei Tutu under the guidance of the priest Okomfo Anikai, who called down from heaven the golden stool, the sacred throne that became the symbol of the Asante nation's soul and unity. The Asante Kingdom at its peak controlled much of present-day Ghana, maintained complex trade networks extending across West Africa, and built a sophisticated political and legal system with detailed constitutional arrangements for governance, succession, and the rights of citizens. The Asante resisted British colonial conquest with extraordinary tenacity, fighting 3 wars against the British Empire before being finally subjugated in 1900 after the War of the Golden Stool, in which Asante women led an armed uprising to prevent the British governor from sitting on the sacred throne. The golden stool was never captured by the British and remains in Ashanti today as the living symbol of the nation's spiritual sovereignty. Matrilineal descent, the AKAN family system. The AKAN peoples practice matrilineal descent, inheritance, clan membership, and succession passed through the mother's line rather than the father's. This is not merely a social arrangement but a theological one. The AKAN understand the blood that determines clan membership as flowing specifically through the mother, while the Sunsum is understood as coming from the father. This dual inheritance, blood from the mother's lineage, spirit from the father, reflects the AKAN understanding of the human being as composed of multiple distinct dimensions, each with its own lineage and its own sacred character. AKAN cosmology Nyam, the universe, and the sacred order. AKAN cosmology begins with Nyam, the supreme being, the omnipotent, omniscient, eternal creator who is the source of all existence. Unlike the Yoruba Olodumare or the Fon Mowolisa, Nyam is understood as both transcendent and directly accessible, a supreme being who is present everywhere and who hears prayers addressed directly to him, not only through intermediaries. Nyam's names. The AKAN have developed an extensive range of names for Nyam that each capture a specific dimension of the divine nature. Onyem Bikir, Onyem Nainakpom, Onyem Awured, Onyem Twejompon. The practice of naming Nyam through his qualities rather than through a single definitive name reflects the AKAN understanding that the divine transcends any single description. It is known through its qualities, its actions, and its presence, not through a fixed conceptual definition. Nyam's symbols in the AKAN world. Nyam's presence in the AKAN world is visible in the symbol of Nyame, a specific Adinkra symbol representing the omnipresence and power of the divine, the Nyam symbol, which declares that nothing in all of existence stands above Nyam. This is the most widely recognized and most frequently used Adinkra symbol. The sacred tree, the Odam tree and the Okyomi tree are understood as sacred to Nyam, places where the divine presence concentrates in the natural world. Rain is understood as Nyam's blessing, his gift of fertility to the earth. The rainy day is not an inconvenience, it is a blessing. Sunday, Nyam's sacred day, the day of rest and worship, when no major new undertakings are begun, when the community rests in acknowledgement of the divine. The soul anatomy Kra, Sunsum, Mogia, and Toro. The AKAN understanding of the human being's spiritual composition is one of the most sophisticated soul anatomies in any tradition, comparable in its precision and philosophical depth to the Egyptian Ko/Bo/Ok system, the Yoruba Ori/Egbe structure, and the Hawaiian fossil system. Understanding the AKAN soul anatomy is understanding the AKAN approach to healing, ethics, community, destiny, and the afterlife. The AKAN soul anatomy overview. KRA, the divine spark given by Nyam at birth, the life force itself, the deeper sacred dimension of the person. The Kra is what makes a person rather than merely a body. It returns to Nyam at death. Sunsum, the personal spirit, the dimension of the person that expresses their individual character, personality, energy, and life force in the world. The Sunsum is the part of you that others feel when you enter a room. It can become ill and can be healed through specific practices. Mogia, the blood, specifically the blood inherited through the mother's lineage. Mogia determines clan membership, which governs all inheritance and social relationships. The Mogia is not merely biological, it carries the spiritual heritage of the matrilineal ancestors. Ntoro, the spiritual essence transmitted through the father. While the physical body and social identity come through the mother's Mogia, the Ntoro comes through the father. Each Ntoro group has specific taboos, specific sacred objects, and specific personality characteristics associated with it. The Kra in detail the divine spark at birth. The Kra is the most sacred dimension of the human being in AKAN theology, the divine spark that Nyam places within each person at the moment of birth, that sustains the person's life throughout their earthly existence, and that returns to Nyam at death. The Kra is not personal in the way the Sunsum is personal, it is the universal divine life force individuated in this specific person, the fragment of Nyam's creative power that makes this person's life possible. The Kra and destiny. Before entering the physical world at birth, the Kra kneels before Nyam and receives its specific destiny, the life path, challenges, gifts, and purpose for this incarnation. This moment, the Kra's reception of its destiny before birth, is the AKAN parallel to the Yoruba understanding of the Ori choosing its destiny, and to the Platonic myth of the soul choosing its life before incarnation. The specific destiny received by the crow before birth is carried throughout life. It is the template against which the person's choices and experiences are measured. The crow day, birthday as sacred occasion. The day of the week on which a person is born is considered their crow day, the day that holds special sacred significance for that person throughout their life. Each day of the week corresponds to a specific Orisha-like divine force in the AKAN tradition, and a person born on that day carries specific qualities, specific spiritual gifts, and specific vulnerabilities associated with that day's divine character. The soul names given to AKAN children reflect their birthday, Kwame, Abina, Kwako, and so on. Honoring the crow. The most important regular AKAN practice for honoring the crow is the crow washing ceremony, performed on the person's birthday, the specific day of the week on which they were born. White clay, eggs, and cool water are used to ritually cleanse and strengthen the crow. This practice is comparable to the Lukumi Rogasian, the Kabeza, and the Kandombo Bori. All three are traditions of attending to the innermost divine dimension of the self as the foundational practice of sacred life. Crow washing, personal practice. Purpose: to cleanse, strengthen, and honor the innermost divine spark on your birthday or at any time of significant transition. What you need: white clay, a fresh egg, cool clean water, white fabric. The practice: 1. On your birthday of the week, prepare a quiet space with white fabric spread out. 2. Mix the white clay with a small amount of cool water to make a thin paste. 3. Hold the egg in both hands for a moment. The egg represents new life, the potential of the crow that has not yet been expressed. 4. Roll the egg gently over your body from head to feet, slowly, with intention, feeling it draw out any heaviness or accumulated spiritual debris. 5. Apply the white clay paste to your forehead, then to the palms of your hands and soles of your feet. Speak: Nayam, I honor the crow you placed within me. I cleanse and strengthen it. May I walk more fully in alignment with the destiny you gave me. 6. Sit quietly for 15 minutes. Then wash off the clay with cool water. 7. The egg should be disposed of in nature, not eaten. It has absorbed what needed to be released. The Sunsum, the personal spirit and character. The Sunsum is the personal spirit, the dimension of the human being that expresses individual character, personality, and life force in the world. Where the crow is the universal divine spark individuated in each person, the Sunsum is what makes each individual specifically themselves, their particular energy, the quality of their presence, the specific character that others encounter when they meet them. The Sunsum and social life. The Sunsum is the most socially visible dimension of the AKAN person. When someone enters a room and the atmosphere changes, when a person's presence is palpably felt before they have spoken, this is the Sunsum making itself known. A person with a strong Sunsum has a presence that others cannot ignore. A person with a weak or damaged Sunsum has diminished social force. Sunsum illness. The Sunsum can become ill through spiritual attack, through violation of sacred taboos, through excessive grief or trauma, or through prolonged moral failure that creates inner conflict. The symptoms of Sunsum illness include social withdrawal, diminished effectiveness in work and relationships, unexplained illness that does not respond to physical medicine, bad luck in business and personal life, and a general sense of spiritual depletion. The treatment for Sunsum illness is spiritual, the work of an Okomfo who can diagnose the spiritual cause, prescribe specific herbal and ritual treatments, and perform specific ceremonies to cleanse, strengthen, and restore the person's Sunsum. The Okomfo's role in AKAN life is comparable to the Babalawo in Yoruba tradition, the Babalawo in Lukumi, and the Wu in Chinese tradition, the trained specialist in spiritual diagnosis and treatment. Connection to halagricity. The AKAN Sunsum, the personal spirit whose strength, health, and clarity determine the quality of a person's life and relationships, is the most direct West African parallel to what halagricity holds about the practitioner's inner life as the foundation of their outer effectiveness. The Holigric Tetrarch's feeling dimension is the domain of the Sunsum, the quality of one's inner presence, the clarity and strength of one's personal energy, the felt sense of one's own wholeness. Practices that strengthen the feeling dimension strengthen the Sunsum, and the AKAN tradition-specific practices for Sunsum health are the AKAN articulations of what halagricity's well-being practices achieve through a different cultural vocabulary. Destiny, free will, and the AKAN understanding of fate. The AKAN understanding of the relationship between destiny and free will is one of the most nuanced and most practically sophisticated treatments of this question in any tradition. Nkwebia, The received destiny. Nkrebia is the destiny received from Nyam before birth, the life template that includes the person's specific gifts, specific challenges, specific relationships, and specific purpose. This is not a fixed, mechanistic fate that unfolds regardless of the person's choices. It is more like a territory with a specific character, containing specific mountains and specific rivers, that the person navigates through their specific choices. Two people can have similar Nkrebia and navigate it very differently depending on their choices, their relationships, and their relationship to the sacred. Obra, the living response. Obra is what the person makes of their Nkrebia through their choices. The relationship between Nkrebia and Obra is the AKAN formulation of the universal tension between fate and freedom. The destiny is given, but the response to the destiny is the person's own work. The AKAN proverb captures this precisely. When you follow in the path of your father, you learn to walk like him. What you inherit shapes what you do, but you are not your inheritance. You are what you do with it. Nyam, the AKAN understanding of God. Nyam is not merely the supreme being in a pantheon. Nyam is the ultimate reality, the source of all existence, the one in whom all other sacred realities are grounded. Nyam is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, qualities that the AKAN explicitly attribute to Nyam and that distinguish the AKAN theological understanding from traditions with more limited divine beings. Nyam is accessible. Unlike the Yoruba Olojime, Nyam is understood as directly accessible. AKAN people pray to Nyam directly, in moments of crisis, in gratitude, in daily life. The AKAN understanding is that Nyam cares about every person specifically and is always available to hear the sincere prayer of any of his children. The ancestors and their bosom are intermediaries that the tradition also works with, but they do not block direct access to Nyam. The Nyam Dua. The Nyam Dua is the primary physical symbol of Nyam's presence in AKAN's sacred life, a forked stick planted near the entrance to the home or in the compound center, symbolizing the tree on which God rests and the family's ongoing connection to the divine. In the fork of the stick, a clay pot is placed containing water, herbs, and specific sacred materials. This pot is regularly replenished and offerings of water and food are placed within it, maintaining the living connection between the household and the divine presence it acknowledges. The Nyam Dua, home practice. Creating a simple Nyam Dua for the home: what you need: a forked branch or Y-shaped wood, a small clay or ceramic bowl, fresh water, white sand or clean earth, and a specific plant associated with the divine. Setup: place the forked stick near the entrance of your home or in the center of your sacred space. Set the bowl in the fork. Fill with clean water, add a small amount of the plant material, and a pinch of white sand or earth from a place that feels sacred to you. Maintenance: refresh the water regularly, at minimum weekly, and more often if possible. When refreshing, address Nyam: Nyam, I honor your presence in this home. I ask for your protection, your blessing, and your guidance for all who enter here. The ongoing relationship, the Nyam Dua, is not activated through a single ceremony and then left. It is a living focus of daily acknowledgement. Even a brief greeting as you pass it, a touch, a word, a moment of recognition, maintains its function as the home's primary sacred connection to the divine. The Abuzum AKAN spiritual forces. The Abuzum are the spiritual forces of the AKAN tradition, beings of significant sacred power who inhabit specific natural features and specific sacred sites, and who serve as intermediaries between the human community and Nyam. They are comparable in some ways to the Yoruba Orishas and to the Chinese folk religions' local deities, specific sacred presences with specific domains and specific communities of practitioners who honor and work with them. The major rivers of the AKAN heartland are understood as primary Abuzum: the Tono River, the Piare River, the Biram River. Each house specific Abuzum whose power governs the fertility of the land through which they flow, the health of the communities along their banks, and the success of those who work with and honor them properly. The great forest trees, particularly the Odum, are understood as sacred presences in the natural world. The Okomfo, AKAN priest and medium. The Okomfo is the AKAN spiritual practitioner who serves as the primary vehicle for the Abuzum's communication with the human community, a medium/priest comparable to the Yoruba Babalawo, the Kandombo Pai/Medesonto, and the Vodou Haungan/Mombo. The Okomfo is chosen by a specific Abuzum, called through experiences of illness, dreams, or involuntary possession, and trained by senior practitioners in the management of the Abuzum's presence, the interpretation of its communications, and the specific healing practices associated with it. The ancestors in AKAN life. The ancestors are active, present, and influential participants in AKAN life. They are not remote historical figures accessed only through elaborate ceremony. They are the extended community, present in the life of the living family, concerned with its welfare, capable of blessing and of withholding blessing, and deserving of ongoing respect and material acknowledgement. The ancestor tradition in AKAN culture flows through the matrilineal clan. The ancestor most intensely present is the ancestor most recently departed, and the practice of ancestor relationship is understood primarily as family practice rather than as a specialized religious activity separate from ordinary life. Regular ancestor acknowledgement in AKAN practice includes the pouring of libation before significant meals, before significant decisions, and at regular intervals. The libation acknowledges the ancestors' ongoing presence, thanks them for their continued support, brings them news of the family's situation, and asks for their continued blessing and guidance. The Adinkra symbols a visual philosophical language. The Adinkra symbols are one of the most extraordinary achievements in the AKAN tradition, a system of visual symbols, each encoding a specific philosophical principle, proverb, or sacred teaching, developed by the AKAN peoples over many generations and now among the most widely recognized African visual languages in the world. The name Adinkra comes from the true word Adinkra, meaning to express oneself or to say goodbye. The symbols were originally used on funeral cloth and on items sent as messages, encoding meaning in visual form. The Adinkra symbols are not a religious iconography in the Western sense. They are a philosophical language, encoding teachings about ethics, about the nature of reality, about the character of the divine and of the good human life. They appear on Kent cloth, on royal regalia, on pottery and carved wood, on architecture, and increasingly on contemporary art and design worldwide, but their deepest meaning is always philosophical and always practical. Each symbol is a teaching about how to live. How to work with Adinkra symbols. The Adinkra symbols can be worked with as living philosophical teachings, not merely as decorative elements but as focused objects of contemplation and practical application. Symbol meditation. Choose a symbol whose teaching is relevant to your current situation or intention. Draw it by hand. The act of drawing focuses the mind on the symbol's form in a way that viewing a printed version does not. Sit with the drawing for 10 minutes, contemplating the teaching encoded in the form. What does the symbol's specific shape tell you about its meaning? How does the teaching apply to your specific situation? Symbol affirmation. State the symbol's teaching as an affirmation for the day. I practice Sankofa today. I return to what I have forgotten and reclaim it. I embody Nyam Dua today. I stand as the meeting point between heaven and earth, the living connection between the divine and the human. Symbol altar. Include the drawn or printed form of a specific Adinkra symbol on your altar for the period you are working with its teaching. Change it as your focus shifts. Symbol journaling. Journal the specific teaching of the symbol through the lens of your current life situation. How is this symbol showing up in your experience right now? The 28 major Adinkra symbols. What follows are the most important and most widely known Adinkra symbols with their complete teachings, philosophical depth, and holygric resonance. Each is a living teaching, not a historical artifact but a practical wisdom tool. Additional Adinkra symbols. How to work with Adinkra symbols complete practice guide. The Adinkra daily practice. Choosing your symbol for the period, sit quietly and review the Adinkra symbols. Notice which one draws your attention. Often the symbol that most needs to be worked with will feel either strongly attractive or slightly uncomfortable. Both responses are informative. Drawing the symbol. Draw the symbol by hand on clean paper. Spend at least 5 minutes in the drawing, slow down, feel the form emerge. The hand-drawn symbol carries more energy than a printed one because it required your attention and physical engagement. The teaching contemplation. Sit with the drawn symbol and speak the teaching aloud. Then sit in silence and let the teaching work on you. Where in your life does this teaching apply right now? What is the specific situation this symbol is speaking to? The daily application. Throughout the day, return to the symbol's teaching in each situation. When facing a decision, what does Sankofa say about this situation? The symbol becomes a practical lens for the day's navigation. The monthly Adinkra review. On the new moon each month, review the Adinkra symbols and choose one whose teaching will guide the month's work. Post it visibly in your space. Return to it regularly throughout the month. At the end of the month, journal. How did this teaching show up? What did you learn? Kent cloth sacred weaving as philosophy. Kent cloth is among the most recognizable African textile traditions in the world. The brilliantly colored, geometrically complex woven cloth of the Asante and Yu peoples of Ghana that has become a global symbol of African cultural pride and identity. But Kent is not merely a beautiful textile, it is a philosophical statement woven in fiber and color. Every Kent pattern has a name and a meaning. Each color combination and geometric arrangement encodes a specific teaching about AKAN values, historical events, or philosophical principles. Gold represents royalty, wealth, and spiritual purity. Green represents growth, renewal, and the natural world. Red represents passion, political power, and the blood of sacrifice. Black represents intensification, spiritual energy, and the wisdom of age. The specific combination of colors in a specific pattern creates a visual philosophical statement that an educated AKAN reader can interpret. Kent is worn at the most significant occasions, naming ceremonies, royal events, graduations, weddings, funerals. The choice of which Kent to wear is not merely aesthetic, it is a statement about the wearer's relationship to the occasion's meaning, their aspirations, and their cultural identity. In the contemporary world, Kent has been adopted by African Americans, African diaspora communities worldwide, and people of all backgrounds as a symbol of connection to African heritage, a Sankofa act of reclaiming what the diaspora experience tried to erase. The stool's sacred authority and ancestral power. The stool is the primary symbol of authority, sacred power, and ancestral connection in AKAN culture, an object of extraordinary religious and political significance that is incomprehensible to anyone who approaches it as merely furniture. The stool is not a seat. It is the material home of a person's soul and, for rulers, of the entire community's ancestral power. Personal stools. Every AKAN person of significance has a personal stool, given at puberty or at the beginning of a significant role. The stool is carved in specific shapes that communicate the person's identity, role, and aspirations. The stool is not sat upon casually, it is treated with specific protocols that reflect its sacred status. When a person dies, their personal stool is blackened with soot and kept in the family's ancestral stool house, becoming the material home of the ancestor spirit and the focus of ancestral veneration for that specific ancestor. The golden stool, the soul of the Asante nation. The golden stool of Asante is among the most sacred objects in all of Africa, the material home of the Sunsum of the entire Asante nation, called down from heaven by the priest Okomfo Anika in the late 17th century to unite the Asante peoples under the leadership of Ose Tutu. The stool is not merely a symbol of royal authority, it is the living spiritual reality in which the Asante nation's collective soul resides. The golden stool has never been sat upon by any human being, not even by the Asantehin. It has its own throne beside the Asantehin's throne, and it is carried and treated with the protocols appropriate for a being of extraordinary sacred power. When the British governor demanded to sit on the golden stool in 1900 as a demonstration of British sovereignty, the Asante rose in immediate armed revolt, the War of the Golden Stool, because what the governor demanded was not merely political humiliation but the violation of the nation's sacred integrity. The war that followed was led by Ya Asantewa, the queen mother of Ejisu, who famously challenged the Asante men, "If you, men, will not go forward, then we will. We, the women, will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight the white men until the last of us falls in the battlefield." AKAN's sacred ritual libation and the ancestors. The pouring of libation is the most fundamental and most regularly practiced sacred act in the AKAN tradition, the primary technology of maintaining the living relationship between the community of the living and the community of the dead, and the primary means of acknowledging Nyam, their bosom, and the ancestral community before any significant action. What libation does. Libation in the AKAN tradition is not symbolic, it is genuinely nourishing. The liquid poured on the ground reaches the ancestors in the invisible world through the earth's mediation. The ancestors drink it. This is not metaphor, it is the AKAN theological claim about what happens when libation is properly poured with proper intention. When libation is poured, specific ancestors are called by name, thanked for their continued care, informed of what is happening in the family's life, and asked for specific blessings related to the occasion. The most senior ancestor is called first, then progressively more recent ancestors, ending with those most recently departed. Each is acknowledged individually, not as a collective ancestors but as specific people with specific names and specific relationships to the living family. How to pour libation step by step. AKAN libation, complete practice. Purpose: to acknowledge Nyam, the ancestors, and their bosom before any significant occasion, a meal, a ceremony, a new undertaking, or as a regular practice of relationship maintenance. What you need: a vessel of liquid, a clear outdoor space or a space near your ancestor altar. The process: Step 1. Hold the vessel. Hold the vessel in both hands. Breathe and center. Feel the weight of what you are holding. This is the material form of the connection you are about to affirm. Step 2. Call NYME. Pour a small amount as you speak. Nyam, you who never die, I pour this libation in your honor. I thank you for life, for breath, for the gifts you have placed in my keeping. Nyam, hear my words. Step 3. Call the Abuzum. Pour again. Abuzum, spiritual forces of the rivers, the forest, the mountains, I acknowledge your power and your protection. I pour for you. Step 4. Call the ancestors. Pour as you call each ancestor by name, starting with the most senior, moving to the most recent. If you know specific names, use them. If you do not know names, use Nananom Samanfo, great ancestors of my lineage, I pour for you. I know your names have been lost to me through the dispersions of history, but I know you exist and I honor you. Pour after each name or acknowledgement. Step 5. Pour for the occasion. State what the libation is for. I pour this libation as I begin. I ask for your blessings, your guidance, and your protection. Step 6. Close. Pour the last of the libation, so be it. Nyam, Abuzum, Samanto, I honor you. Medos. Frequency: ideally before every significant meal, before every ceremony, at the new and full moon, on the anniversaries of ancestors' deaths, and at any significant life transition. The festival calendar and the sacred year. The AKAN sacred calendar is organized around two overlapping systems, the 7-day week and the 42-day AKAN calendar cycle, each cycle culminating in two major sacred days, Akwasidi and Awukudi. Akwasidi and Awukudi. On Akwasidi and Awukudi, the Asante Royal Court performs specific ceremonies at the ancestral stoolhouse, the repository of the blackened stools of deceased chiefs and royals. The ancestral stools are brought out, libation is poured, and food offerings are made to the ancestors whose stools they are. The ceremony maintains the living relationship between the current leadership and the ancestral authority whose power it carries. Major festivals. Major AKAN festivals. Odwara, the most important of the AKAN festivals, a purification and thanksgiving festival held annually after the yam harvest. The community cleanses itself of the previous year's accumulated spiritual pollution, gives thanks for the harvest, and renews its relationship with the ancestors and with Nyam. The Odwara begins with a period of mourning, then transitions into celebration and feasting. Homawo, the festival of the Ga people whose name means to hoot at hunger, a harvest festival celebrating the end of a historic period of famine. Traditional food is prepared and shared with the living and the dead simultaneously, pouring some on the ground for the ancestors. Oam, a river festival in honor of the Abuzum of major rivers, a purification ceremony for the entire community, including ceremonial bathing in the river and the renewal of the community's covenant with the river's sacred force. Royal Debars, major occasions in the AKAN royal calendar when the Asantehin or other paramount chiefs receive their sub-chiefs and the public in elaborate ceremony, with the Kent cloth, the royal regalia, the sacred stools, and the entire sacred material culture of the tradition on display. Puberty and coming-of-age Bragoro. The Bragoro is the AKAN female puberty ceremony, the ritual that marks a girl's transition to womanhood at the time of her first menstruation. It is one of the most important life cycle rituals in AKAN tradition, publicly celebrating the girl's new status and formally incorporating her into the community of women. The Bragoro ceremony. The Bragoro involves the ritual bathing of the new woman in water with sacred herbs, the application of specific clay and oils to her body, the wearing of specific cloth and jewelry that mark her new status, the gathering of the women of the community to celebrate and teach her, the specific foods and drinks prepared for the occasion, and the formal public presentation of the new woman to the community. The ceremony is celebrated with music, dancing, and a communal feast. The theological significance is clear. The onset of menstruation is not a private, medical, or shameful event. It is the most significant physiological threshold in a woman's life, marking her entry into the fullness of her creative power, and it is honored publicly with ceremony, celebration, and the community's explicit acknowledgement of her new sacred status. Death and funerary practice in AKAN tradition. Death in AKAN tradition is not an ending but a transition, the departure of the crow back to Nyam and the transformation of the person from a living community member to an ancestor. The funerary practices of the AKAN are designed to manage this transition carefully, to honor the person who has departed, and to establish the conditions for the ancestor's ongoing beneficial relationship with the living family. The AKAN funeral. AKAN funerals are communal events of extraordinary elaborateness, lasting multiple days, involving the entire extended family and the broader community, marked by specific clothing, specific music, and the preparation and serving of specific foods. The body is laid out in state, often in specially made coffins that reflect the deceased's life or profession. The funeral announcement. Traditional AKAN funeral practice is notable for the specific role of the Okiomi in formally announcing the death and organizing the community's ceremonial response. The announcement is made through specific drum patterns and through the formal notification of the extended family and community. AKAN healing, herbalism and sacred medicine. AKAN healing tradition is one of the most sophisticated ethnobotanical traditions in West Africa, a body of knowledge about the healing properties of specific plants, developed over centuries of careful observation and transmission, that operates simultaneously on the physical and the spiritual dimensions of illness. The herbalist and the Okomfo. AKAN healing distinguishes between the Odonsinia and the Okomfo. In practice, these roles often overlap. A skilled healer addresses both dimensions, because the AKAN understanding of illness recognizes that most significant conditions have both physical causes and spiritual causes. Effective treatment must address both. Sacred herbs in AKAN tradition. Specific plants are understood as having specific sacred properties in AKAN tradition, not merely chemical properties but spiritual characters that make them effective in specific types of healing. The plants associated with specific abusum carry the spiritual power of those forces. The plants used in purification rituals have the specific quality of removing spiritual pollution. The plants used in strengthening ceremonies build Sunsum vitality. The Odonsinyai's knowledge includes both the specific physical actions of plants and their specific spiritual characters, and this dual knowledge is what distinguishes the AKAN healer's practice from merely empirical herbalism. The Okiomi, the art of sacred speech. The Okiomi is one of the most distinctive and most philosophically interesting institutions in the AKAN tradition, the specialist in sacred speech whose role is to mediate all significant communication between the chief and the public, transforming what the chief says into a form appropriate for public hearing and what the public says into a form appropriate for royal reception. The Okiomi's role. The chief never speaks directly to the public in formal settings. The Okiomi receives the chief's words and retransmits them, elaborated, beautified, and contextualized. Similarly, the public's words to the chief are received by the Okiomi and retransmitted in the appropriate register. This practice is not bureaucratic obstruction, it is the recognition that significant communication requires a specialized vehicle, that the movement of meaning between different registers of power and authority requires mediation by someone trained in both registers. The Okiomi staff. The Okiomi carries a distinctive staff topped with a gold-covered finial depicting a specific symbol, often Sankofa, or a hand with a palm knot, or another Adinkra symbol appropriate to the Okiomi's role. The staff is the Okiomi's emblem of office and the material symbol of their function, the sacred word given visible, portable form. Connection to halagricity. The Okiomi institution, the specialist in sacred speech who transforms raw communication into its most appropriate, most beautiful, most effective form, is the AKAN articulation of what halagricity holds about the speaking dimension of the tetrarchy. The tetrarchy's speaking dimension is not merely verbal expression, it is the deliberate, skilled crafting of the exact words, in the exact form, in the exact register, that will carry the feeling and thinking most completely into the world. The Okiomi knows that the same truth, expressed differently, lands differently, and that the practitioner of sacred speech takes responsibility not only for the truth they carry but for the form in which it is delivered. AKAN proverbs as sacred wisdom. The AKAN tradition is extraordinary for its proverbs. The ebe are short, precise, often startling statements of wisdom that encode years of collective observation and philosophical reflection in forms that can be memorized, recalled in the moment of need, and transmitted without loss across generations. The AKAN say, it is the elder who has the best proverbs, and the measure of wisdom is the ability to produce the right proverb for the specific situation. Onipeno or here onipod, it is a person who needs a person, the fundamental teaching of interdependence. No one is self-sufficient. The person who imagines they do not need others has simply not yet encountered the situation that will reveal their need. Yonam na yinim the akodi, we are the ones who know how to carry difficulty, the recognition that the community has survived difficulty before and has the resources to survive difficulty again. Not denial of hardship, but trust in collective resilience. Obinkia akodonayam, no one teaches a child about God, the AKAN recognition that the knowledge of the divine is innate. Every person, however young or uneducated, already knows something of Nayam from within. Teaching can deepen and clarify this knowledge, but it cannot plant what is not already there. Tiri Moon Sem now Iden, the matters of the head are difficult, the recognition that what happens in a person's inner life is more complex and more determining than external circumstances. The deepest problems and the deepest resources are within. AKAN tradition today. The AKAN tradition is vigorously alive in contemporary Ghana. The Asante Kingdom with its paramount chief, the Asantehin, at its head remains a functioning institution with significant cultural, social, and in some domains political authority. The festivals, the Odwara, the Royal Darbars, the Akwasidi ceremonies are still performed, still drawing tens of thousands of participants, still enacted with the full material culture of Kent cloth, royal regalia, and the sacred stools. The Adinkra symbols have achieved remarkable global spread. They appear on architectural elements of the African Union headquarters, on jewelry and textiles sold worldwide, on academic regalia at African universities, and on the walls of African American cultural institutions across the United States. The Sankofa symbol in particular has been widely adopted in the African diaspora as a symbol of cultural reclamation, exactly the use that its teaching prescribes. At the same time, Christian evangelicalism is the majority religion in Ghana today, and many elements of traditional AKAN practice have been challenged or suppressed within Christian communities. The Okomfo tradition is under particular pressure, the same tension between independent sacred authority and institutional religious control that has challenged shamanic practitioners in every tradition where institutional religion has become dominant. Allegricity convergences. Sankofa, the most holy Greek teaching. The Sankofa principle, it is not wrong to go back and fetch what you forgot, is perhaps the single concept in any tradition that most directly names what allegricity is doing. Every deep dive in this library is a Sankofa act, returning to the traditions that have been forgotten, marginalized, or suppressed, and bringing their wisdom forward into contemporary sacred practice. The entire project of the Allegricity Personal Reading Series is a Sankofa library, a systematic reclamation of what the dominant narrative of Western civilization tried to make us forget. The AKAN named this practice 2,000 years before Allegricity was conceived. Sankofa. The soul anatomy and the tetrarchy. The AKAN soul anatomy Kra, Sunsum, Mogia, Ntoro provides the West African philosophical confirmation of what the Holy Greek tetrarchy holds about the human being as a multidimensional reality. The Kra corresponds to the practitioner's deepest divine nature, the divine spark that cannot be lost or destroyed. The Sunsum corresponds to the feeling dimension, the personal energy and presence that others experience and that responds to both inner and outer cultivation. Mogia and Toro together point toward the complex of inheritance that the practitioner works with and within. The Adinkra and the Holy Greek symbol. The Holy Greek symbol is a visual philosophical encoding of the core Holy Greek teaching, just as each Adinkra symbol is a visual philosophical encoding of a specific AKAN teaching. The AKAN tradition's centuries-long practice of using specific visual forms as philosophical languages, each form a teaching that can be read, contemplated, and applied, is the most developed ancient parallel to what the Holy Greek symbol practice does. The Adinkra and the Holy Greek symbol are the same kind of thing, wisdom made visible, philosophy given a form that can be held, carried, drawn, and contemplated. Libation and the ancestor altar. The AKAN libation practice, pouring liquid on the ground while calling ancestors by name, thanking them for their continued care, informing them of the family's situation, and asking for specific blessings, is the most complete model in any West African tradition of the Holy Greek ancestor altar practice. The AKAN do this before every significant meal, before every significant undertaking, at every significant occasion. The relationship with the ancestors is not a special practice for special occasions, it is the ongoing, daily foundation of sacred life. The Holy Greek ancestor altar is asking for the same daily, practical, relational engagement that the AKAN libation tradition has maintained for generations. The Okiami and Holy Greek sacred speech. The Okiami institution, the specialist in sacred speech who transforms raw communication into its most appropriate, most beautiful, most effective form, is the AKAN articulation of what Allegricity holds about the speaking dimension of the tetrarchy. The practitioner who knows what they feel, who has thought clearly about it, and who then chooses precisely the right words in precisely the right form to carry that truth into the world is practicing the Okyomi's art in Holy Greek form. Sacred speech is not merely sincere expression. It is skilled craft in the service of truth. Crow washing and Holy Greek self-preparation. The AKAN crow washing practice attending to the innermost divine dimension of the self as the foundational preparation for sacred work is the West African parallel to the Kandombo Bori, the Lukumi Rogasian de Cabeza, and the Holy Greek understanding that the practitioner's inner preparation precedes and enables their outer effectiveness. All traditions confirm the same recognition. Before you can serve as a genuine vehicle for sacred force, you must attend to the divine spark within you, feed it, cool it, clarify it, align it. The crow washing is the AKAN technology for this foundational work. Se wewe fina wa Sankofa yenchi. It is not wrong to go back and fetch what you forgot. AKAN Proverbs. The bird looks backward while moving forward. The wisdom that was forgotten does not cease to exist, it waits, patient, for the one who will return to claim it. The Adinkra symbols are still speaking. The libation is still nourishing the ancestors. The crow that Nayam placed within each person at birth is still present, still the same divine spark it was on the first day, waiting for the practices that will allow it to be recognized, honored, and expressed in its fullness. Sankofa. Go back and fetch it. Grand Rising. Personal Rising Barry's Halignicity, Seed Production, May 2028.